One of the most important things I have to teach you in this class is how to evaluate and how to determine what makes a good source, especially in this age where we are finding all of our information online. We need to be really smart in terms of which sources we're going to believe, which sources we're going to take with a grain of salt, and which sources we're going to throw out because they're junk sources. Okay, so this is a really important lesson. Evaluating sources is a really important part of being a wise consumer and being a smart academic in this day and age. Okay, so I'm going to take you through different ways to do this. One way that we can determine a quality source is by looking at published sources. Okay, so these are long-standing sources that have been around for a long time. ABC News, the National Review, which is a right-wing journal that has been around for a long time. New York Times. These are all books. Books are published sources. Okay, these are vetted sources that have taken quite a long time to put together. It's written by a team of people. They might not be experts, but they have spent a long time, months, days, months, sometimes years to put these together. So published sources is one good way to determine if it's a good source. Okay, there are better sources, but published sources are written by an organization versus just an individual. Okay, which is prone to make more mistakes. Another good way to identify a quality source is if it's a well-known, established name. Okay, so the CDC, this was CDC and WHO were two organizations during the pandemic, which were reliable sources of information. Did they get it 100% right? No, it was the pandemic was something they were trying to figure out as well. So, but they were a quality source that were nevertheless good. IPCC, this is an international organization. If you are in environmental science, this is a name that everyone knows. The Department of Justice generally is going to be regarded as a quality, excellent source. Neil deGrasse Tyson, sometimes he has podcasts, he has videos on YouTube. Even though they're on YouTube, because this guy is an expert and because he's the one putting out this information, that's a good source. That's a good source. This is another video from YouTube put out by Robert Reich, who's a former labor secretary and a professor at UH Berkeley. Okay, he also happens to be a really good animator. And is very knowledgeable about economics. Are his YouTube videos a good source? Yes, they're a good source because these are well-known, established names. Okay, and we know who they are. We know their background. The gold standard in terms of what makes a good source are peer-reviewed sources. These are academic sources that have been peer-reviewed. Please take a look at this video. The link is there for you on the Laulima page. This here, the New England Journal of Medicine, this is a peer-reviewed source. This is an academic journal. Each of these articles, each of these lines here, it has the page number that refers to an article in this particular journal. It does not look very friendly. It looks very hard to read. Peer-reviewed journal articles are normally going to be 20 or more pages long. The legal articles sometimes get to be like 80 or 100 pages long. They're ridiculous. But these are written by academics who are experts in their field. They're not written by just journalists who do not necessarily have a degree in their topic. These peer-reviewed articles are written by scientists, or they're written by social scientists, people who are experts in their field. This is a published source. National Geographic is well known for their photographs. This is a famous photograph of I think an Afghani girl during the early 2000s. This is a published source. National Geographic is a great source, but it is not a peer-reviewed source. Okay, the National Geographic survives by making money by selling magazines. Okay, these guys, they make their money by selling their journals to libraries or to doctors, people in the field. Okay, this is a professional journal. They don't make a whole lot of money either. These guys, this is a commercial business. This is a fine source, but it is not a peer-reviewed source, which is the best kind of source. It is the best kind of source because it's written by experts in the field. Okay, getting a little repetitive there. Okay, sometimes primary sources can also be a great source. Primary sources are sources it's straight from the horse's mouth. It's the person witnessed or experienced what they're talking about firsthand. So if you're writing about domestic abuse, your primary source might be a video that was posted on social media, or on YouTube about the person who experienced domestic abuse. They experienced it firsthand. It's not an expert researching the domestic abuse. It's not a journalist writing about the domestic abuse. It is the person who experienced it firsthand. That is a primary source. So if someone saw an accident, if someone went up into space and they're writing in their journal about their personal experience of going up into space, that's a primary source. Once someone else is writing about that person's experience, that's a secondary source, because you just moved one step away from that primary source, right? So we have some sources here. This is a comment on the New York Times, and he says he's a retired Foreign Service officer. Assuming this is correct, and we should take everything we find online with a grain of salt, but assuming this guy is the Foreign Service officer, we can kind of take what he says and think about it and analyze it and integrate it into our ideas. This is a tweet that someone posted where he's posting about Chinese people's reactions to the Hong Kong protests. Okay, so she's just sharing a video to help Westerners understand what's in Chinese people's minds. So she's actually not taking a point of view. She's just posting a video of this person and so this video itself would be the primary source. In general, .govs are going to be a good source. They indicate that it's a government source. You can have local city and county .govs. You can have White House, federal White House. There's a lot of different .govs out there, and they're generally going to be a good source. Anything related to edu, they're not trying to sell you anything. If it's an edu suffix on their URL, on their domain URL, then they're not selling you anything. They're representing the school. Something like stanford.edu, there's going to be a lot of different departments within Stanford, and the website you're looking at is going to be reflecting the views of that particular department or organization, not Stanford University itself. So EDUs are generally also going to be a good source. Sometimes they might be a primary source where they're kind of stating their views on something. Be careful with this though, because Stanford EDU, you might even have like graduate students posting blogs that are not finished products yet. There's stuff in the works, and you need to also take that with a grain of salt. Okay, .com, be careful with these. A lot of our published sources are going to be .com, but .com means it's a commercial website. It means they're trying to sell you something. So a lot of our published sources, as I said, are going to be .coms, but you might need to be careful with the .coms. .orgs are going to be our nonprofits. They're not trying to sell us anything. These are non-for-profit organizations and are generally pretty good sources. Keep in mind, however, as nonprofits with a dedicated mission, they might have a certain bias. PETA.org, for example, is known, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, PETA. They are known for really being very concerned with the ethical treatment of animals. And so some of their stuff has been very violent and kind of, disturbing. And so they definitely have a bias. They're probably not going to tell you falsehoods, but they might still have a bias, okay? And that's something we need to be aware of. .net, which you might see once in a while, is going to be tech related. We don't usually come across that. But anyway, these suffixes in the URL are something to be aware of, and something to take into consideration as you select which sources to believe. But for whatever website you're taking a look at, guys, you need to look at the about page to figure out who is putting this information out there, who is paying for this website, because someone's paying for this website, okay? What is their motivation? Whether it's on social media or it's their own website or if it's a blog, what is their bias? If it's PETA.com, you should be aware of their bias. Whatever their agenda might be. How authoritative is this source? Is it a peer-reviewed source or a primary source? Primary source, that's like the lowest level of authoritativeness. They are experiencing it firsthand, so their view is important, but are they an authority? No, they're not. Okay. And finally, when was this information put out there? The when is going to be important, is more important at sometimes than others. But it's something to take a look at.